Welcome, and thanks very much for joining us. I'm Dr. Kelly Victory. I'm filling in for Dr. Drew today. Delighted to be doing it. He and Susan are off, I think, in Florida or somewhere on the East Coast doing another project. So I'm filling in. Also, happy week after Thanksgiving. I don't know about the rest of you, but I am still recovering from fully falling off of my normally regimented diet of relatively low carb and very low sugar. I'd love somebody to tell me the absolute number of grams of sugar in an entire pecan pie, because I pretty much consumed my body weight in refined sugar over about a 3-day period. So anyway, the thing that saved me, Caleb, was that I stayed on my exercise routine. I continued to work out despite the fact that I was eating things I never eat. And now I am back on the wagon. So we've got that. I'm really happy to be joined today by one of my very favorite guests, Ed Dowd. It's hard for me to imagine that anyone who's watching this show or follows me doesn't know of Ed and the remarkable work that he has done for the past 5 years, really tabulating and coordinating, collecting data related to the pandemic. We're going to be talking about quite a few things, including data around excess deaths, but also we're going to chat a little bit about Trump's recent cabinet picks, as well as the some of the financial and economic issues that are going to be at the beginning of the new Trump administration. So Ed's going to get us caught up on everything that he's been following. As I said, he has been an indefatigable champion for exposing data related to COVID and related to the impact on excess deaths, excess disability, and those sorts of things. So we'll be back in just a minute, and I will more formally introduce Ed at that time.
Our laws as it pertains to substances are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say. I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins, and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue. And we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15.
Welcome back. As I said, I'm joined today by Ed Dowd. Ed is a former Wall Street analyst. He was a portfolio manager at BlackRock, and most recently is the founder of Finance Technologies. He wrote a book called Cause Unknown: The Epidemic of Sudden Deaths in 2021 and 2022. And as I said in the intro, he has been, more than anyone else I know, the coordinator, the tabulator of data related to illness, injury, death, disability, these sorts of things, following the rollout of the vaccines. And while Ed is more circumspect than I with regard to saying what's, the cause unknown, I know the answer. We can talk about that. So I'm going to bring Ed in. We're going to talk about the state of the data, as it were, on, what are we seeing in the last year or so. Ed's been a guest previously on this show, so we've talked about some of this stuff in the past, but I want to see really where the trends are going and talk a little bit more in depth about what this means in terms of the ongoing trends in increased all-cause mortality, decreased birth rates, those sorts of things. We're also going to talk a little bit about the Trump cabinet picks. Ed, nice to see you. Welcome back. I don't know, did you do what I did over Thanksgiving? Please tell me you did. Please tell me you totally fell off the wagon and ate everything you don't normally eat.
I did, and I started a carnivore diet Sunday night. I've already lost 6 pounds of mostly water weight, because when you eat like we did over the holiday, your body tends to hold more water because you're eating sugars and things you don't normally eat. So I'm back on it again.
Exactly. Well, thank you. Then I'll feel so guilty because I was really, really feeling weak as somebody who I preach good health and good nutrition all the time. And I was exhibit A of exactly what you shouldn't do on a holiday, but I did it anyway. So I'm back on it. Let's talk. I don't want to get into specifics about any particular cabinet nominee in the new Trump administration, but I'd like to get your thoughts in general on, directionally where this is going, where it's teeing up. And I don't mind talking specifically about Robert Kennedy Jr., who both you and I know personally and have supported. So we can talk about him, but give me your thoughts just in general about where this is going and what you'd like to see.
Well, first of all, what happened after the assassination attempt of Trump on July 13th, Bobby Kennedy joined it. Then Bobby eventually quit his campaign and teamed up with Trump and brought a lot of voters over. And this is a disruptive administration. Bobby Kennedy's mere presence is disruptive. He's an environmental lawyer. He's been fighting that regulatory regime for a long time, and corporations polluting the environment. He then got on the vaccine train, and he knows how to dismantle the corrupt institutions brick by brick. So I'm very optimistic. We need to get him confirmed. I'm fearful that there's $5 trillion in annual GDP in the healthcare system that's going to give money to senators in their PACs to try to get some of the Republicans to not confirm him. There's a lot of moneyed interests that don't want to see him there. Net, it's a huge win for America, and I just hope he gets the confirmation and it's smooth sailing from there. I have a lot of hope.
I certainly agree with you on that. I think, to be very clear, Bobby Kennedy is extremely threatening to a lot of people on both sides of the aisle. And it's not for the reasons they say. They throw out pejoratives like, oh, he's anti-vaccine or anti-this, when the reality is what they're threatened by is the fact that they will lose their control. They will lose money. He's going to do things like, eliminate the ability for people at our 3-letter agencies to own parts of patents on drugs or therapeutics that they are in a position to foist on the American people. He's going to eliminate things like pharmaceutical advertising on television and those sorts of things. And that's clearly why they want to keep him out. Do you believe that, given the sort of the force, given the amount of energy behind this campaign, and I think it was a brilliant move for Trump to embrace and bring him in, do you think that they can pull off keeping him out? Can they keep him from, I don't know enough about how the process works in the confirmation process to know, can they actually effectively keep him from being confirmed?
I believe they'll try, and as we get closer to confirmation hearings, I expect all sorts of tantalizing headlines about Bobby and quote unquote women that'll be, very specious. And I don't think America cares about that. I think America wants them in there. And I also think that the biggest risk are senators that get bribed wholesale by the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry into their PACs and their campaigns. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, and Big Pharma is the biggest, most powerful lobby in all of Washington. They've given more money to political campaigns, again, on both sides of the aisle. There's probably a handful of senators who didn't take money over the years from Big Pharma to fund their campaigns. So I know that that's going to be really, really powerful. I don't know how it will all shake out. What about the idea of Trump making Bobby a recess appointment?
That would be fabulous. And I don't know the inner workings of all this. If that's possible, I would do it. And go from there. But I was on a call today where it was discussed that there will be a Senate confirmation process for Bobby. But again, I don't know the specifics, the why, the where, the how. But I would love to see a recess appointment personally.
Independent, so yeah, I think that may be the way to go as well. Independent of the individual nominees, and some of them are a bit perplexing, I might throw out there, but independent of the individuals, what are, in your mind, some of the top? I just rattled off a couple with regard to television advertising, for example, and the ownership of patents. What are the top initiatives that you think are important in these different agencies that need to happen, or what do you need to see happen right out of the box to know that this is legit and that this campaign, that this new administration really is going to make good on their promises to the American people?
Well, there needs to be a definite reopening of the COVID vaccine, and I'd love to see that product recalled in the first 6 months of the administration. That's obviously one of my issues that I've been hammering on for the last 4 years. If we don't see it recalled, then I'll start to get suspicious, or at least a serious examination of it. There could be other ways to thwart the mRNA vaccines, remove the immunity that Big Pharma gets for vaccines, repeal the 86 Act. That would then, the market would correct itself because then it would be liability and doctors probably would walk away from it. But I'd like to see full stop the recall of this vaccine. It should have already been recalled. I mean, we had a swine flu situation in the 70s where 50 people died. Right. They recalled it. And now we have 30,000 deaths due to the vaccine in bears. So let's stop kidding ourselves. It needs to go.
100%. Just to make sure that for anyone who's listening, what you're referencing when you say the 86 Act, you're talking about the Childhood Vaccine Injury Act that was passed in 1986 by Congress. And it was passed as an effort to incentivize vaccine manufacturers to be willing to develop more vaccines for children. But in so doing, they granted to the vaccine manufacturers blanket liability protection. They cannot be sued. They have no exposure, which would be tantamount to saying, and I use this example all the time, I would not buy a baby car seat that said on the box, by the way, if your child is maimed or killed by a malfunction of this product, good luck to you because you can't sue them. They have no liability. I wouldn't buy that product. Why in the world would I allow somebody to inject my child with a product that fundamentally says the same? If your kid dies from this or is maimed or disabled for the rest of his or her life, you have no recourse. It's insanity. So I'm with you. That needs to be repealed. I also agree we need wholesale removal of the mRNA vaccines from the market, given the data, and we're going to get into the weeds again of what you've seen recently, but it is so egregious. It is so irrefutable to me, what has gone on. Just another study came out today, a really well done report on the contamination of these mRNA shots. I don't know if you saw it with this SV40. That's DNA that in layman's terms, what we have now shown is that the BioNTech, Pfizer mRNA shots are contaminated with DNA that promotes cancer as well as promotes antibiotic resistance. More than four times the allowable amounts of this is contaminating these. That by itself, should cause these to be removed. So what's your stance on pharmaceutical advertising? You have thoughts about that?
Yeah, two things. First, let me go back to what you said about the Vaccine Act. Prior to '86, there were six or seven vaccines in the childhood schedule. It then exploded to 70 plus over the course of the next several decades. And I just want people to understand how profitable it is for a pharmaceutical maker to do this. They don't have to advertise. They don't have a sales and marketing budget. It's part of the schedule, and the margins on these products are huge. And even though it's only given to the children that are born, it's a steady, high profit business, and it's sickening that we have 70 plus of these now. Back to the removal of the pharmaceutical ads. I think we're one of two countries, us and New Zealand, that allow it.
That's correct.
Yeah. And let's be honest. No one purchases a drug because it's advertised on TV. The doctors usually are using their knowledge to then give out a drug for whatever symptoms you have. It's basically hush money to the networks to not investigate anything about large pharma. It's hush money. I think Roger Ailes even admitted as much to Bobby Kennedy in a meeting. Don't you ever bring up vaccines on my show? And this needs to go. It literally. And I think I heard some statistics recently that some of these networks get 40% of their ad revenue from the pharmaceutical industry, and that needs to change.
Yeah, Roger Ailes, the former CEO of Fox News, actually acknowledged that he wanted to get rid of pharmaceutical advertising on Fox, but at the time that he made the statement, it represented 70% of the advertising revenue for Fox News came from big pharma. And as you said, Ed, they don't advertise because they think they can sell 3 more doses of Ozempic. They advertise so that they can control the talking heads, so that they can make sure that nobody ever says a bad word about their products, says anything about their liability protection on vaccines, says anything about the fact that there's a question whether statins are legitimate or should be prescribed, any of that. They do it to control it. And there's a reason why every other country, with the exception of New Zealand, it doesn't allow it, because you cannot have integrity in the media if the media is completely owned and controlled by big pharma. So I think that this is a huge issue. And back to what you were saying about, when you think about the profit center of vaccines, if you don't have to spend any money on marketing because they're mandated, they're on the childhood schedule, and your kid can't go to school without them, and you don't have to spend any money on liability, you don't have to have lawyers or fundamentally malpractice insurance, the entire thing goes to the bottom line. It is a cash cow. So if you wonder why there's an effort to keep Bobby Kennedy out of HHS, it has nothing to do with what they're saying. It's purely about the dollars. So let's pivot for a second here now to the update on the, what I would call the state of the data. Many people who are watching this undoubtedly have followed you like I have for the duration of the pandemic, but kind of take us through where you started and what you're seeing, what trends have continued, what trends have, what's the trajectory of the lines that you're seeing with regard to excess deaths, disabilities, all the things that you and your team have been tracking.
Well, it's a good news, bad news situation. Let's start with what happened and where we are now. So, in 2020, we had 500,000 excess deaths due to quote unquote COVID. You can make an argument that had a lot to do with the hospital protocols and procedures and denial of early treatment. That's not my area of expertise, but a lot of people have talked about that. So mostly old people died in 2020. Then a similar amount of excess deaths in 2021, 500,000. But there was a huge mix shift from old to young. And that for me was a smoking gun. We had about 124,000 people die ages 16 to 64 in 2020. And then that went up to 235,000 in 2021. So, for me, I'm not a doctor, but I don't know any virologists that will say that decreasing variant strength is going to, disproportionately affect young people, especially employed. So excess mortality peaked at 40% in the working age population in 2021. There was the classic Society of Actuaries study that showed in their group life policies in the third quarter of 2021, millennials, specifically 25 through 44, experienced excess mortality in that quarter. I surmise that it was likely due to the pull forward effect of the vaccine mandates. Those who had been on the sidelines had to get a jab or lose their job. So that was a very one-time event pulled forward. So the good news is over the last 3-4 years, excess mortality is down to about 10% run rate. Now, that's good news, but 10% steady state is a disaster in the long term. And the CEO of One America, Scott Davison, said in January of 2022 that his book of business just experienced 40% in that age bracket. And that was unheard of. And he said 10% was once in a 200-year flood. So we've gone from, and then he said 40% was unprecedented and incalculable, hard to calculate how off the charts it was. So now we've gone from off the charts to once in a 200-year flood steady state. And that's a disaster long term. Where the good news is booster uptake is abysmal. If you look at the stock prices of both Moderna and Pfizer, they've come down quite a bit. Moderna is down 90+% from its high, and they don't have any other product that's available for sale. So they need revenue, and they're trying hard to get these mRNA platforms approved in all sorts of different indications. Like they want to create vaccines for cancer, which just sounds insane to me. A vaccine for cancer. I thought vaccines attacked viruses, but maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. So that's where we are. We're also going to start taking a look at birth rates, which we've hesitated to do because one of the things that affects birth rates a lot is the economy, and it's globally there's different economic forces working. But if the birth rate is persistently lower over time, then we know we have a signal, and we're getting close to starting to examine that.
Yeah, so a few things here. I'm very interested in what's going on with the birth rate. You and I were talking the other day. There are a couple of countries. I believe that Taiwan is one of them. I think it's either North or South Korea. You had mentioned was another where birth rates are fundamentally at extinction rate. If they continue, going like this, birth rates are so low that it's not sustainable. So when you add together the impact of excess deaths plus decreased births, the overall impact on the population growth is really profound. And what people need to understand is population isn't just how many people are on the planet. So it's also whether or not it's sustainable from an economic standpoint. There are lots of downstream impacts. So talk just for a second about population in general. It's not just sort of, it's sad that people are dying, which it is, tragic that they were killed fundamentally by these shots, which is horrific. But just talk a little for a second about the impact of plummeting population.
Yeah, so one of my partners, Carlos Alegria, before I met him, wrote a book called Economic Cycles, Debt and Demographics. He did a great study in all the different demographic situations going on across the globe. And prior to COVID, China hit a demographic wall in 2020. So they're on a demographic decline, which is bad for their economy long term. South Korea had a problem. Japan has a problem. Southern Europe has a problem. He predicts that at some point the euro will disband because of the disparity between the countries that produce with growing populations and the Southern European countries that have an aging problem without a commensurate birth increase. So that was prior to COVID. So now we have excess deaths and potentially lower fertility rates, which again, we haven't spoken on that, but we're going to look at it. Mm-hmm. And South Korea, we looked at preliminary data. It looks like extinction level event going on there that over time the economy will collapse. And sure enough, South Korea is in the news. They declared martial law. We suspect that was to cover up a currency crisis and a collapsing stock market, but because their central bank came out immediately and provided as much liquidity as needed. So these have real-world consequences long-term for a lot of these economies. They don't collapse overnight, but it's definitely not good. And demographics, you can't trade on demographics, but you can certainly catch long-term trends.
Yeah, and with regard, just so that people understand, with regard to this fertility issue, birth rates in particular, we have clear pathophysiology that explains why these mRNA injections might be the cause. With regard to men, we know that males who receive the injections show lower sperm counts and lower sperm motility, for example. We know that there's a protein on the spike protein of COVID, for which the shots cause you to form antibodies, that is very, very similar, almost identical to a protein that is critical for the formation and development of the placenta. So if you get one of these shots and you develop antibodies to the spike protein, at the same time you are developing antibodies to a forming placenta, which may well explain why we're seeing increased rates of miscarriage or failures of women to be able to get pregnant in the first place. So it's not like we're just there's not just a correlation, there's actually good, pathophysiologic explanation for why that might be happening. So we're seeing that. With regard to, also, I would maintain, if you pulled the shots off the market today, if you completely said, okay, no more mRNA shots, so we still haven't seen the end of the health impact, the negative impact on the people who took them. And I think the lagging disease that we're going to see, we certainly saw the sudden cardiac deaths, the myocarditis, obviously the anaphylaxis, blood clots and strokes early on. It's the cancers and the autoimmune related issues that I think you're going to see for the next decade. We know we're seeing increases in almost every cancer. Are you guys following individual condition increases or just deaths?
No, we've looked into some causes. Obviously, we showed there were inflection points beginning around 21 in cardiac cancers, especially amongst the young, an increase in cancers and neurological issues. Neurological issues, I think, are going to be a big problem going forward.
Yes.
And we're looking at, we're going to drop a report in January on skin and liver. So it's metastasizing in all sorts of different conditions, right. and statistical aberrations, meaning inflection points, and somehow the young are being, old people get these conditions, but even in old people, we're seeing signals. So we're seeing signals all over the place that something changed. You all know what it was. It was a mass vaccination program. And what's been annoying to me is that we can't even talk about this subject in the mainstream media or at the governmental level. I will note we had a campaign between two individuals, Harris and Trump, where COVID was not discussed or the vaccines, the whole campaign. And that's what I don't want to see going forward, is that kind of mentality, because this needs to come to light, because so many people don't know what's happened to them and they can't treat the core root of the problem. They're treating symptoms.
I agree with you, and for what it's worth, people disagree with me all the time, and people are welcome to their opinion. If you think I'm an idiot, absolutely, that's your opinion. You're welcome to that. But what you're not welcome to is to not provide another explanation. I happen to believe, as you do, that the cause of these things is the mass vaccination program. If you disagree with that and you say, that's not what happened, great. What's your theory? Because the data don't lie. You have the numbers on excess deaths, on excess disability, and we know the increases in certain disease processes, whether it's cancer or myocarditis or strokes or whatever it is. Those data do not lie. So you are required as a scientist, and this is what kills me about my colleagues who dispute that it's the vaccine. Great. If you don't think it's the vaccine, what is your explanation? Because you can't just ignore the data. You are obligated to come up with another credible idea. And so far, in climate change, I don't know. What was it? What's your theory for what caused this? But you can't just say, I'm wrong, and not come up with something else that you think is credible. So we're going to take a quick break here, quick ad break, and then come back and finish talking about this. And then I want to pick your brain a little bit before we run fully out of time on the issues around the economy. So we'll see you back in a minute.
The Wellness Company knows that taking charge of your family's healthcare is a top priority, and being rationally ready, and who knows what the future will hold for us. Now, TWC has a service to cover your family's medical needs, including and especially prevention. For just $100 a month, the One Wellness Elite membership includes 2 free medical-grade nutraceuticals per month, free prescriptions for over 800 of the most common medications, access to concierge telemedicine, available at a moment's notice, and a 15% discount on all supplements and the emergency kits. 15% off the emergency kits. That's quite a saving. So if you're spending $100 or more on supplements and meds every month, this plan will already save you money. If you sign up for a year, you'll save $200. And when you use the link, drdrew.com/TWC, you'll get 10% off the first payment to the One Wellness Elite membership. Check out One Wellness at drdrew.com/TWC and get 10% off your first payment. drdrew.com/TWC. It's all there. I want to teach you about pharmacogenomic testing. This is changing the way we approach healthcare. By analyzing a patient's genetic profile, pharmacogenomics helps physicians personalize drug treatments for more effective results. First, it enhances medication efficacy by predicting how a patient will respond to a specific drug, reducing the trial and error process, especially in mental health care. For example, it can guide the choice of various medications to minimize side effects and improve outcomes. In the long run, pharmacogenomic testing leads to cost savings. It shortens the time to find the right treatment and avoids expensive side effects. It also supports more personalized care, helping physicians make better decisions and ensuring that treatments are tailored to each individual's unique genetic makeup. Test simply requires you to swab your cheek, then you send in the sample to our lab. Discover the power of personalized medicine with pharmacogenomic testing. Tailor your treatments based on your unique genetic makeup. Reduce trial and error, avoid side effects, find the most effective medication for you. Take control of your health today. Go to drdrew.com/checkgenetics. That is drdrew.com/checkgenetics.
There's nothing in medicine that doesn't boil down to a risk-benefit calculation. It is the mandate of public health to consider the impact of any particular mitigation scheme on the entire population. This is uncharted territory, Drew.
Welcome back, and let's bring Ed right back in here because I want to clarify. I was thinking, Ed, we were talking about the excess deaths, and you were saying good news, bad news, that we've gone from a high of at one point 40% increase, excess all-cause mortality to now down to 7 to 13% or wherever we're floating right now. That's with regard to deaths. What about disability? If you said it, I missed it. Where are we on the increases in disability rates overall?
So we started inflecting in February of 2021. It was a rapid 3 to 4 standard deviation rate of change into September of 22. So we added 3 million to the 30 million that had been running around in the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the prior 4 or 5 years. So in a very short period of time, we added 3 million disabled Americans. We plateaued for a while. Then in June of 2023, we spiked up another million, which I suspect was statistical gamery. They found that, you don't have a million all of a sudden added to the disability roll. So I'm sure they trued it up. And then we've been going sideways ever since. I'm expecting another true up at some point. And the chart, if you're looking at the chart is not your friend. It looks like it's consolidating. So we have about 4 million disabled, and you got to remember, disabled can go away and die. So that's one thing. And the other thing to think about is that about half of the newly disabled came from the employed pool. So wow. employed individuals usually are the healthiest amongst us because by the very nature of being working age and going to work. That was another tell for me that the vaccine might have something to do with this because there are, mandates for those employed, whereas the rest of the general population had a choice. And the rate of disabilities in the general population into our study at the end of 22 increased 8%. The working age folks increased 33%, or the actual employed. So their rate of disability increased more than the general population, which doesn't make any sense.
And there's so many things that are unspoken that we don't talk about that are related to these numbers. If you look at any particular industry that relies on skilled workers, say airline pilots or the military or even, somebody in high tech, if the people who end up being disabled and taken out of the workforce are then replaced by new hires, you think about what that means for the skill level of the average commercial airline pilot. If the veterans are the ones who are disabled because they took the shots and they get replaced by people who are just new, we are replacing them with people who are less skilled, less experienced, have less years behind them. Same thing with our military. You have a portion of our military who chose to leave voluntarily or was fired because they refused to take the shot. And the ones who stuck around and took it, many of them are now working part-time, half-time, or working not up to full capacity. We've put a serious hurt, from my perspective, on the strength of our military, our young troops, as a result of this singular vaccine initiative. And I don't think we'll ever really get our arms around just how profound the impact was. Do you guys, follow or watch or crunch the data from other countries, or are you just looking domestically?
Well, we looked at the UK in a lot of our cause studies and our absence rate studies and our disability studies. So in the UK and US, we found similar findings, especially amongst absence and work time lost rates. They are very steady, and they inflected in 21 and 22 to the point where there are 12 to 13 standard deviations in both countries above trend. And so what does that say to us? That says that there's a category of people called injured who are constantly sick and missing work. And if you look at the Pfizer clinical trials, there were 18% more adverse events, SAE, serious adverse events in the vaccine arm versus the placebo arm. So just based on that alone, it should have failed the safety trial, but they pushed it through. I mean, you know how the FDA works. In the old days, forget they failed the all-cause mortality endpoint, where there were 23% more deaths in the vaccine arm. They failed the safety tests. There were 18% more SAEs, right. And this is a joke. I mean, I don't even know why. I'm still just befuddled why we're still here talking about this. It's one of the greatest psyops and psychological operations I've ever seen. And first of all, it's not a vaccine; it's a therapeutic, right. And they called it a vaccine so they could get it under the EUA. We're living in bizarro land where there's so much fraud in our healthcare system, fraud in the government, fraud in the economic statistics they're putting out. It's literally the golden age of fraud in my mind.
I agree with you 100%. And I think this is the single biggest issue that Robert Kennedy Jr. can tackle. It's he's not going to focus just on vaccines. It's the overarching fraud, corruption, and graft that is absolutely inculcated into our three-letter agencies. I don't care if it's, FDA, CDC, NIH, but also the DOJ and the IRS and everywhere. We are living in the age of abject lying and fraud, truly.
Let's talk about that for a second. A critic came out recently against RFK. Scott Gottlieb, the former head of the FDA under Trump, who then parachuted into being a board member of Pfizer and became basically the spokesperson for Pfizer all over the financial news media. He got free advertising going on CNBC all the time. And he just came out and said that Bobby Kennedy will be bad for Americans' health. And I look at that, and it makes me sick to my stomach. That guy profited from the vaccines and his nonsense lies about how efficacious it was and safe.
It's unbelievable, but truly, we are living in an area. I think I just did a talk about this. In an era of lying, where lying has become so commonplace. You are expected every day. We are bombarded with things that simply aren't true. The economy is booming. Your car causes climate change, but Bill Gates' private, jet doesn't. The police are systemically racist. Men can have babies, whatever it is so insane. When I was growing up, and I will date myself, there were two really popular shows. Both of them were predicated on the idea that reality itself was being manipulated. One was The Twilight Zone, and the other one was called The Outer Limits. And they both had to do with, do not touch your television set. We control the vertical. We control the horizontal. It was the idea, that was what was so terrifying, that there was some other force that was controlling reality. And I feel like we have entered the Twilight Zone. We have reached the outer limits. It is just pure insanity. You touched at the very beginning, and I want to go back to it for a second. You're talking about how these things should have been pulled. In 1976, the swine flu vaccine was rolled out, and it was pulled from the market after there were 50 associated deaths that were believed that could have been related to that vaccine. It was pulled. We're now at how many potentially associated deaths for the COVID vaccines? What's your number?
In VAERS, I believe it's 30,000 globally, and I think maybe 16,000 in the U.S. And if you look at the underreporting factor, and multiply it, you take 20, use a number of 20 or 41. I think 41 was the one calculated using the CDC's methods. That's you get to close to the number that we've calculated. 1.2 million Americans perished between 21 and 23. That was corroborated, mind you, by another economist / business consultant, ethical skeptic on Twitter, who's anonymous, but he does separate work, different methodology, and we corroborate each other all the time. So we're not in cahoots. We just put out our results, and our results corroborate each other. And I also want to note, Peter Hotez came out recently in an interview and said that he saw a study that the vaccine saved lives, about 3 million, because even though 1.2 million Americans died after the vaccine rollout, now I find that interesting because that's exactly the number that myself and ethical skeptic have come up with. So they're now admitting 1.2 million Americans did die excessively since the vaccine rollout, but don't worry about it because more people would have died without the vaccine, and they pull some mythical, magical, statistical garbage out of their butt.
No, I agree. It's very common to what I hear amongst people, whether it's at a cocktail party or just in passing, that, the people who have been vaccinated, who I know have been vaccinated, are sick over and over and over again. Many of them have had COVID 4 and 5 and 6 times. But then they'll say to you, well, but imagine how much worse it would be if I hadn't been vaccinated. I'm saying, well, you could be like me and never have had COVID at all if you weren't vaccinated. They pull these numbers out. They've drunk the Kool-Aid, and they absolutely won't look at the reality of what's happening around them. They are in the Twilight Zone. I want to touch back on the neurologic things you were saying, that you believe we're going to see more of these neurologic complications. I agree with you, because many of the neurologic complications from a medical perspective are autoimmune related, whether it's multiple sclerosis, ALS, those sorts of things, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, have an autoimmune component to them. Furthermore, the people who are examining these very unusual blood clots, these kind of rubbery, white, extensively long blood clots, have found that those blood clots contain a protein called amyloid. For some reason, you're developing or laying down profoundly huge amounts of amyloid that make up these clots. Well, amyloid is what also lays down in the brain and causes Parkinson's. Now, whether these things are related or not, no one has been able to prove, but I have a sneaking suspicion that you're going to see more of these neurologic issues because of the creation of some of these abnormal proteins. Let's face it, that's what the mRNA codes your body to do, is to create a spike protein, and then you create antibodies to it. But it's causing you to create a foreign protein. never a good idea, wasn't a good idea from the beginning. I don't care, your first, year biology student should know this. You don't want your body creating massive amounts of a foreign protein. It's going to set off autoimmune diseases all day long. And I think that's what we're seeing. So any other thoughts? I want to pivot to some things about the economy. Any other thoughts or anything else you'd like to get out to folks with regard to what you're seeing or what you're following next? What's next for you guys with regard to your data analysis?
Well, we're going to update 2024 numbers for all our studies. And then we got a liver paper coming out, skin paper, musculoskeletal skin paper coming out. And, we're just going to continue to monitor what's going on. And the disability number comes out this Friday, along with the non-farm payroll. So I'm very eager to see what direction it's going. And it's close to a new all-time high again. So we'll see if we go to a new all-time high on Friday.
Give me a glimpse, if you can, on liver and skin. You're talking about liver and skin conditions?
Liver deaths. And skin issues, skin deaths, musculoskeletal deaths. On the liver, there definitely was an effect in the older people that we can attribute most likely to the vaccine. It's more money in the younger age folks because there was an increase in alcohol consumption during the lockdown.
Sure.
But if you parse the data, we can tease out a signal. But we're going to put the data as it stands and let the chips fall where they may.
I'll be particularly interested in the skin data because the reality is, again, from a medical perspective, other than melanoma, most skin cancers, certainly most malignancies, are not lethal. The vast majority are not. I think we've seen a change in that recently. We've seen a number of people, including some high-profile people, say a Jimmy Buffett, who passed away, we are told, from an aggressive skin cancer that was non-melanoma. Is that the sort of thing that you're seeing in this data?
The report's not finished. I haven't seen it yet. My partners are working on it, so I don't want to conclude anything right now.
Fair enough. Okay, we'll look forward to that then. But unfortunately, I fear we are going to see, and as I said, I believe that with you, that neurologic, autoimmune, and cancer deaths and rates are the thing that we're going to see going forward, probably tragically for a good decade. Obviously, there are many people, including my colleagues, who are working feverishly to find things to detox from the spike protein. We're looking at things to sort of unwind this. How can we change the trajectory of this? Because it's really our challenge for the next decade. But until we pull the shots from the market and stop people from getting them entirely, and stop producing new ones because they're constantly threatening that they're going to come up with one for RSV, or we've got a mRNA shot for monkeypox, we've got one for bird flu, now we're vaccinating the cattle and the chickens and the turkeys. It is just stop. And again, this, like Bobby Kennedy, this does not make me anti-vaccine. What it makes me is pro-science, pro-data, pro-safety, and pro-sanity. Just stop until we get our arms around this. So until we do that, I don't think the hemorrhaging is going to stop. You've had some posts recently and some interviews recently. Let's face it, you didn't start as a scientist. You didn't start as somebody looking at medical data. You started as an analyst, and you are brilliant in my estimation with regard to understanding trends and understanding sort of the economy and different levers here. Talk a little bit about your thoughts about what Trump is inheriting, where the economy is, and what he needs to look out for.
Well, there's two things. There's the stated GDP numbers and establishment non-farm payroll survey, and there's economic reality. Trump got elected in primarily Bobby Kennedy and Elon and everyone who contributed helped, but Trump primarily got elected because of the economy. And in 1980, Ronald Reagan had real average wage earning growth at minus 2%. He got swept into office. In 1992, minus 2% for Bill Clinton, And James Carville said, it's the economy, stupid. And by the way, those two numbers were associated with recessions. Trump prior to the election had a -2% number. No recession, oddly enough. But I believe one's coming when the truth is revealed. The government has been spending for the last 2 years crisis-like deficit spending, meaning in the great financial crisis, we had 10% deficits to GDP. We're at 8% right now. What's the crisis? Well, the crisis was to get Biden or Harris reelected and retain power. That was their crisis. And they basically, in my estimation, and I've talked to economists offline who won't say this publicly, but they agree with me, they've cooked the books. The non-farm payroll numbers are statistical lies. They keep, you got to remember, when they come out with the number on Friday, it's an estimate, but then gets followed up with real data later. They keep putting out these fake numbers, then they get revised down. In August, we had a revision of 850,000 jobs down. We have the private sector. Every indication of the private sector is that it's contracting. So what did they do? They opened the floodgates for immigrants, gave them stimmies that helped juice the economy short term. That's part of the deficit. Then they hired government workers like we've never seen before. In September alone, I think it was like 950,000 government jobs right before the election. So Trump's policies are going to reverse all this. And so the recession will be revealed. There are already revisions going on, major revisions starting to happen. And I'm sure we're going to see more revisions coming forward. And the true state of unemployment is way higher than the stated 4.5%, 5%, whatever it is today, more like 10 to 15.
So you're saying that we fundamentally have been in a recession. They've just been, like everything else, covering it up with smoke and mirrors like they do with everything else.
Smoke and mirrors and actual government spending and deficit spending to kind of juice the economy and let it limp along a little more. But Trump is going to stop the immigration. So that's short-term juice that disappears. He's going to cut government spending. So his policies initially will be contractionary, but needed to be done because the government, it's called fiscal dominance. The government was overwhelming the private sector. And we can't have there's no middle class in that. So Trump's plan is to reestablish the middle class. The middle class did well under him. Their per capita GDP income rose up until 2020. 2020 was a disaster, but every year up until then it was up. Since Biden got in there, it's come way down. Obviously, inflation has helped with that. And the rich, the very rich, the 0.1%, under Trump, their percent of financial wealth declined. Under Biden-Harris, it went up to all-time highs of 15%. So 0.1% of the wealthy own 15% of the financial assets in the U.S.
So let's talk a little bit about, given what you're saying, and I believe that you are correct, and I certainly, like you, am very happy about Trump's efforts, his initiatives towards, whatever you want to call it, limiting government, the whole, DOGE thing, the Department of Government Efficiency. And between Elon and Vivek, I think that they will slash and really cut out a lot of the fat. That's all awesome. But what you're saying is going to happen is it's going to be a contraction and the recession will be revealed. Communication is the key to this. What, if you were advising Trump or, if you were in the cabinet, what would you be telling him to be saying? Because this is about getting out in front of this. Otherwise, he's going to get tarred with this. And it's going to, the left is going to have a field day and say, see, his policies, suck. And, they've driven us down, a financial disaster. What would you be advising him to be doing right now, in December?
Yeah. So his Treasury Secretary that he just nominated, Scott Bessent, has been trying to get the message out. It's the 3-3-3 plan, 3% growth, 3%, I forget but it's the 3-3-3 plan, and it's a good plan. And he also has been communicating that the cannon has been spiked by the Biden administration, both at the Treasury level and the government spending level, the deficit spending. So he's messaging it. We need Trump to start messaging it. Trump needs to stay away from the stock market as an indication of how he's doing, because the stock market is at levels of valuation we haven't seen in quite a long time. Warren Buffett, about a year and a half ago, started accumulating cash, and he has the largest cash pile he's ever had, $350 billion. He is getting out of stocks, and he has been. He owns 4% of the Treasury bill market, more than the Federal Reserve. He's been here before. He's waiting patiently, and he's not looking for a 10, 20% correction. He's looking for a lot more. Now, I was more bearish on what was going to happen if Harris had gotten in there. Under Trump, I think we got a shot of this drawdown coming in the stock market and financial assets as being not as deep as it could have been. And then, hopefully, if he gets all his policies implemented, his deregulation, his tax cuts for the middle class, his energy policies, his trade policies, we will see something like we saw in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan got handed a recession in 81 and 82. But by the time his reelection came around, the economy was booming. So that's the model.
Yeah, because it seems to me, I'm hardly an economic expert, but I do understand leadership and communication. And it seems to me that what he really needs to be doing, Trump needs to be doing, is tell people what's going to happen. When it happens, acknowledge this is what's happening. And then afterwards you say, see, I told you that's what was going to happen, so that you lead them through it. You don't wait. You've got to get out in front of this and predict it, acknowledge it when it happens, acknowledge it once it's behind us, say this is exactly what we expected. We aren't caught back on our heels. We have a plan for this. He has to make it very much a plan. Otherwise, I think that the vast majority of the population, clearly, my feet have barely hit the ground since November 5th. I'm thrilled with the outcome. I was very, very concerned that they were going to steal this election and that we were going to end up in a disastrous situation, potentially, literally, not hyperbole, the end of our republic, I think, had Harris gotten elected. But many people, I think, believe that come January 20th, it's going to be all, unicorns and balloons, and it's going to be great. And I don't think that's necessarily what we're looking at for the reasons that you've said. And I think that Trump would do himself a big favor to get out and start talking about this ahead of time, what to anticipate, what to expect as a result of the shenanigans and the cooking of the books, as it were, that's gone on in the economy that he's inheriting.
Yeah, and let's also not forget this. The fourth branch of government, the bureaucratic state, the administrative state, the deep state, whatever you want to call it, did not get thrown out of office on November 5th.
Right.
They're still there. They're like blood-soaked ticks. And they're going to do everything they can to protect their jobs. And the messaging from the Trump administration, Elon Musk and Vivek, is we're going to cut jobs. So these people are going to do everything they can to thwart Donald Trump and his administration. This is existential for them. So this is not going to be as easy as we think. There's a lot of mechanisms they can use to thwart him. Let's say he writes an executive order on day one, it'll be challenged in the DC Circuit Court, and then he'll have to go to the Supreme Court, as opposed to Biden does an executive order, no one challenges him in any courts. So this is part of the problem we have. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be a communication effort, a PR effort, and Trump needs to get out in front of the economy before the mainstream media does, and call it before it happens.
Do you think that Elon and Vivek Ramaswamy can do what they've been tasked to do, not being in cabinet positions? Do you think they will have the teeth to be able to do what they need to do?
I'm not sure the inner specifics of how it's going to work. What I do know is they're already, before Trump gets in there, trying to pre-spend so that he can't cut the spending before, the end of 25. We're trying to front load the budget and then, make it into law so he can't start cutting spending until after the fiscal year end in 95. Or 25, sorry. 25.
Yeah. Are there any people who you personally would really like to see in the cabinet, whether it's on the financial side or DOJ, that are there particular people you've been waiting and hoping are going to get tapped to be in some position that you think could have an impact?
Well, I was very nervous about the Treasury Secretary. I like Scott Bessent. I like what he's talking about. I want to put people at ease. He did work for George Soros, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because you have to understand how his operation works. He has Soros Fund Investment, and then he has the Open Society, which is his political arm. The fund investment is about making money. You could care less whether you're one-horned, one-eyed, purple people-eating monster. If you make money, you're in. And there are plenty of people I've known over the years who had nothing like George Soros's political views, but yet worked there because it was a good job and paid well. As Scott Bessent left because of his political disorientation with Soros, and had enough FU money that he could go out on his own. So I don't think people don't label this guy as a Soros toady. He's saying all the right things. The capital markets and people on Wall Street like him. And there were other appointees that were floated that were making me very nervous. So I'm happy about that, because if we don't get the Treasury right and the dollar right and the economy right, it's chaos. So I'm glad about that. Obviously, I'm happy with Bobby Kennedy and Jay and others. There's some I don't like, but that's okay. I'm not going to get my laundry list of everybody.
Right. That's how I'm too. I'm staying out of the weeds on individual nominees at this point. It remains to be seen who else is going to get confirmed. I certainly hope that Bobby Kennedy will be confirmed, because I think that leadership position is a critical one, and everything that, goes, down from there. Hopefully that will happen, and we'll see where the other ones go. Thanks a ton. I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to this next report. You said that your next report's dropping on Friday?
No, the January, but the disability numbers come out. Disability numbers come out Friday. So
Gotcha.
Look, what I think might happen, this is game theory, but if I'm a bureaucrat in the Bureau of Labor Statistics and I'm worried about my job, I'd start reporting truthful numbers now under the Biden administration. That's my hope.
Oh, that you're right. That is game theory. But yeah, for them to also decide, let's have a moment of honesty so that we can look good. From your lips to God's ears, we shall see. Let's pray that President Trump stays healthy and well until January 20th. We are still in a really tenuous time from my perspective right now. Very bizarre things have been happening in the world, and we want to make sure that we have no reason for civil unrest or martial law or any of the other things that could happen if we had a crisis. So hoping that that's the case, and looking forward to having you back. This is we've got to do this on a regular basis, because you keep exposing, Ed, the most remarkable data. And listen, the data don't lie. As I said over and over again, you can disagree with me about how we interpret it. You can disagree with how we've analyzed it, but the numbers are the numbers. And unless people want to come on here and give other credible explanations or plausible theories for what's causing this unprecedented increase in deaths and disability and disease rates, until then, I'll stick with my theory. So thanks again for joining us. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. Great to be here.
Thank you. And then I've got here, whoops, what did I just do here? I've got the upcoming shows here. Let's see, you got them up there? Thank you. December 5th, Elijah Schaefer and Janine Turner. And then December 10th, Justin Bateman. A show that I'm really looking forward to, December 12th, Matthias Desmet with Aaron Cariotti. Aaron's one of my favorite people. But Matthias Desmet, I think most people know, is the person who really coined the term mass formation psychosis. He came up with an interesting theory about how it is that we ended up with the absolute insanity that defined the COVID pandemic. And then Justin Hart and Toby Rogers and Seth Dillon and Gad should be really good lineup coming into the Christmas holiday. So thanks very much for joining us. Join me back on the no sugar, low carb bandwagon, and I will see you soon. Thanks.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.